Ah, ¿subo? Ah, okay. Hi, everyone. Today we have the honor to have here with us um, an editor from the RSC, and I will read a brief semblance of her. Claire Sycamore-Howe is a passionate chemist dedicated to advancing science, education, and professional development. She currently works at the Royal Society of Chemistry as an accreditation and chartered status specialist, supporting university programs and professionals pursuing chartered chemist status. Claire holds a Master in Science in Chemistry with industrial experience from the University of Nottingham, including a year at AstraZeneca in Gothenburg, which sparked her lifelong love for Sweden and its language. Before joining the RSC in 2020, she worked in science outreach and widening participation at the University of Warwick and other organizations. Claire loves cycling, baking, reading, and is still determined to master Swedish. With her mix of scientific insight, outreach experience, and genuine care for people's careers, Claire brings warmth and purpose to the chemistry community. So, hands for Claire.
Hopefully you can hear me okay? Yeah, brilliant. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really honoured to be here. I've been in Mexico for about a week, so the good news is the jet lag's worn off, so you should get the best out of me today. I'm here to talk to you in a bit more detail about student careers and publishing. But first, I'm just going to give you a bit of background to me. So I work for the Royal Society of Chemistry. I've worked for the RSC for about 5 years now. And I work as an accreditation development specialist and also on chartered chemist as well. And that's all part of the careers team. So I spend a lot of my time talking to chemists like yourself about their careers, about their development and what they'd like to do in the future. So to start with, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got here, a bit about the RSC, and also some information and guidance on what you could potentially do in the future with your chemistry degree as well. So a bit about me, as you've already heard, I initially worked for AstraZeneca. So as part of degrees in the UK, you can do an industrial placement. And I was offered an industrial placement in Sweden. So I got to spend a year working for AstraZeneca in Sweden, which I really enjoyed. It was a really great opportunity. I then graduated in 2015 from the University of Nottingham. And I also did a bit of postgraduate research at Nottingham as well, which I really enjoyed, but unfortunately the chemistry didn't work. So that sometimes happens. I then went and worked in student recruitment at the University of Warwick. And after that, in 2020, in the peak of the pandemic, I then joined the Royal Society of Chemistry. I was looking for a bit of a change. So my role at the University of Warwick was more general. It wasn't really focused on chemistry or science. I could be talking to people about humanities, which obviously is interesting, but maybe is not where I see myself, and also wasn't really where I saw my career going either. So I wanted to move back into chemistry, and a role came up at the Royal Society of Chemistry. I've then been working on accreditation and in the careers team since 2022. So I've been there 3 years now, and I really enjoy my job and I really enjoy my role as well. So a bit more about what I do. So I speak to universities about accreditation. So it's really important to the RSC that we're upholding standards in education and also standards across the profession as well. There's lots of different ways that we do this. So for example, we do it through membership, we do it through professional awards, but one of the ways that we do is we have a big education team who look at education in the UK and worldwide. And I in particular look at courses internationally, but also in the UK as well. So checking what degrees are being what's being taught in degrees, really, what practicals are being done, things about exams, all of those sort of things. I also work on approved training courses. Again, it's this idea that we're checking the quality of professional development that people are doing, making sure that they're getting the right access to the courses that they need to develop in their career. I also work on Chartered Chemist. And for me, I really enjoy the fact that I get to use my chemistry every single day. Maybe not in the lab though, although I did work in the lab, I learned quite quickly it wasn't for me. But I do still get to use chemistry and I get to work with chemists, which I really enjoy. So I work with lots of people across the chemical sciences, from educators, lecturers, people working in industry, and RSC members as well. So for me, the core of my job and what I really enjoy about my job is events like this, where I get to come out and speak to people like yourselves. And I really enjoy that, getting to hear about the chemistry you're doing, getting to hear about the courses that you're studying. People are always so enthusiastic and really love the chemistry they're doing. And that makes me enjoy my job more. So I guess why the RSC, when there's all of these different opportunities that I could have done, different places that I could have worked, why would I want to work for the RSC? Well, it's one of the oldest chemical societies in the world. So it was established in 1841, initially as a chemical society. And then in the 1980s, we joined together with the Analytical Chemistry Society as well. It's a global community. So on any given day, I could be speaking to people from Mexico, I could be speaking to people from France, Germany, Australia, Indonesia. And I really appreciate that, because it's really, chemistry is global. We can't work in isolation. So I really appreciate the fact that the RSC is a global community. It also has a really strong focus on its members and making sure that the resources are there for people like yourselves to succeed in the future. And it's also the professional body for the chemical sciences, and it employs around 600 staff. So it's a relatively big size for the UK. It really embeds this idea that the community is really important, and it really wants to give the community a voice as well. So the RSC as well does a lot of campaigning, especially in the UK, to make sure that issues such as, for example, sustainability, we're doing a lot of work on PFAS at the moment, really making sure that these key issues are on the government's agenda and that the public know about them more broadly. And that really resonated with me, because I wanted to work somewhere that was trying to make the world a better place. It's also a trusted voice within the chemical sciences. The RSC has a really excellent reputation, and I really wanted to work somewhere that I felt I could be proud of, and I'm definitely proud of working for the RSC. So as I've said, we're a professional body. We have about 50,000 members. It's nearly at 60,000, but I've been told I can't say 60, you've got to say 50. So as a global community of about 50,000 members, we're very focused on publications as well. So you may know the RSC because we're a publishing house, and we have some internationally renowned publications as well. So again, to me, I really wanted to be somewhere that had this reputation, had this trusted voice, and was really, again, contributing to new science going into the world and supporting its members. As we're a not-for-profit organisation, what that means is that any money that is made, for example, through publications, goes back to the community. So we do a lot of funding for chemists such as yourselves, especially for early career chemists. There's a lot of funding available. So the focus really is on making sure the community gets the support that it needs, and the education, for example, in the UK, that we're supporting teachers really well. And again, that all resonated with me. That's why I wanted to work for them. So as I've said, I really wanted to work somewhere that can make the world a better place. And our purpose and our vision is that the chemical science, to help the chemical science community make the world a better place. So that's why I in particular wanted to work for the RSC. So that's a bit about me and a bit about my career, but obviously, what are you thinking of doing in the future, and what would you like to do in the future? So some places that you could maybe consider starting, and this is definitely some places that I started, although what I would say is that I only sort of realized some of this maybe 8 years into my career. So I definitely recommend starting a little bit earlier. For me, I think maybe it would have brought me to the RSC at perhaps an earlier point, and I maybe would have found my place and found the role that I really enjoyed a little bit earlier. So it's definitely worth spending some time when you're at university, either in your later years, or if you go into any postgraduate qualifications, really thinking about where you want to go in the future. So what do you enjoy? For me, I really enjoy going out into the community and speaking to people, which is why this role is perfect for me, because I'm here today and I get to speak to all of you. What's important to you as well? So as you've heard, it was really important to me to work for somewhere that was reputable, somewhere, that had this really good reputation, that really embedded the ethos and the values that I wanted to follow with. So have a think about that. Obviously, we all need to live in a world that is getting ever more expensive. So do you have particular salary ranges that you want to aim for as well? Is money something that motivates you? Because obviously that is potentially going to drive where you apply, where you want to work. Industry tends to pay a lot better perhaps than academia. So that is something to always consider. And again, is there anything that is definitely a no that you wouldn't ever want to work for, that you wouldn't ever want to do? So for me, although I enjoyed my time in the lab, what I realized was that I enjoyed working with the people rather than actually doing the lab work. So at the end of it, for me, I decided that it was a no for working in the lab, but I did still want to end up in chemistry, and that's how I ended up at the RSC. There's also this idea as well that you may have thought traditionally about the way that careers work is that you get a job, you then get a promotion, you then get the next promotion, and it's all very linear. In today's world and in today's societies, this isn't necessarily the case. So there's this concept that's called squiggly careers. So at any point in your career, you might have a role at a particular organization, but you then might need to make a sideways step rather than a leap up, or maybe you want to retrain and you want to go and work somewhere else. This idea that you would go to one company and stay at this one company for the rest of your career, the rest of your life, unfortunately, just isn't really true of what's happening in the job market at the moment, and also the chemical sciences as well. And it's a lot more common now for us to see, for example, the one on the right, where maybe people choose to retrain, maybe they choose to go and get a different role. So I'd also really like you to just be aware that it's not a failure if you end up doing different roles. You go into a role for 2 years, you move somewhere else, you move somewhere else. That's more tradition, and it's more traditional to think that you would start at point A, get to point B. But really, and I mean, this is true for me as well, I tried a few different things. So I went and worked at the University of Warwick. Maybe it wasn't for me, so I went and tried something else. So when you're planning your career, also just bear in mind as well that you might have end goals, but how you get to them might be a little bit different, and that's completely okay as well. Also have a think about how involved you want to be in science. So do you want to do hands-on science? I've already told you I didn't want to do that, but I did still want to use my chemistry knowledge. So is there a role where you do want to use your scientific knowledge? And also think about maybe how do you want to apply that as well? We'll talk a little bit later about publishing and maybe working in publishing. That's one way that a lot of people at the RSC apply their knowledge and use their expertise. But again, they're not necessarily in the lab, but they are working very much at the forefront of science, as they get to see a lot of new publications, they get to see a lot of new reviews. So there's also those things to consider as well. And finally, across any chemistry degree, and a lot of what the work that I do is all about skills and using your skills as well. So thinking about the skills that you're developing through your degree, not just your chemistry knowledge, there's a whole range of other things that you'll be doing, like communication, like teamwork, and all of those will contribute to the use of your skills as well. So having a think again about, is there a particular thing that you enjoy? Like I said, I really enjoy working with people. I really like teamwork. So I'm in a role and I'm in an organization that is very teamwork driven, and that gives me a lot of satisfaction. I'd really recommend that you go away and do some research. So the RSC spends a lot of time and money supporting people like yourself who maybe are thinking about what to do in the future. And we have a lot of information on our website about what the future of the chemistry workforce might look like, and also guidance as well in the careers that you might want to go into. So the careers team have created a future in chemistry. I really would recommend that you go there. I can see some of you taking pictures. So yeah, definitely, please go and look at this website. It gives you a lot of different ideas of the areas you could potentially go to in chemistry. So we've got loads of videos on there, interviews with chemists working in a wide variety of different topics, a wide variety of different areas. We've just published a really big piece of work. This was UK focused. However, I think there are some of the learnings that can be taken from it, especially on the skills, are applicable globally. Looking at what the future workforce might look like in the next 10 years. And this is obviously, we've got the rise of AI. So looking at what the skills that you guys might need in the future. So things like digital skills are becoming a lot more important. These are just some of my favorites from A Future in Chemistry. So this one is Raquel, and she works to create a fabric that comes from pineapple leaves that would otherwise be burned. I'm pretty sure that when I was a student, I would never have thought that this type of role would have existed in chemistry. And it really just goes to show the different areas that people are working in. And another area that we're seeing quite a lot of growth in as well is cosmetics and formulation. So Charlotte works to create environmentally sustainable cosmetics as well. So again, it's not just perhaps the traditional areas that we see, maybe like, pharmaceuticals. Everybody's heard of people working in pharmaceuticals in chemistry. There's loads of different areas that you can go into. So I would really recommend that you go and have a look at the website. There's also other areas that you can go to as well. So, for example, the Chemistry World has a lot of information about upcoming trends. So we have a lot of science journalists who work for the RSC and for Chemistry World, and they spend a lot of time horizon scanning and looking at what's coming up next. There's also jobs boards that are posted on the Chemistry World website as well, and they're global. So wherever you're interested in working, go and have a look at those. It's all about you spending time to investigate the different options that are out there. So even if you're not at the point where you're graduating, it's really worth going and having a look at the jobs that are available right now, because it might help you to identify certain skills that you want to develop. Maybe there's a certain knowledge area that you want to work on over the next few months or years that you're at university. And all of that is really valuable knowledge to help you drive your career forward as well. So moving on to what your options might be to work in the chemical sciences. So this is from the Chemistry Workforce Report. It's a lot of writing, please don't read all of it. What I want you to take away from this is that chemists work in a lot of different areas all over chemistry and the chemical sciences. So quite often, we do hear about research and development. That is a big area, but there's also manufacturing, architectural activities, water. There's so many different areas that you as a chemist can go and work into. And also thinking more generally about the skills that you might need for working in these areas and working as a professional chemist as well. So what are your next steps in terms of planning and thinking about what you want to do? So think about where you want to work. We've mentioned previously that salaries might be a little bit higher in industry. So is working in industry something that appeals to you? They do often have really competitive salaries, but sometimes it might mean that you are in a more specific role because the organizations are so large, they can employ so many different people. It can mean that sometimes you can end up quite siloed, but equally, they're very large companies, so they do have the opportunities to provide you perhaps with different professional development opportunities. They do tend to be quite deadline driven because obviously it is industry, so very focused on making money. But there will be different skills areas across the business that you could potentially research and go into. You could work for what we call an SME, which is a small and medium enterprise. So they tend to employ fewer than 500 people. So they tend to be quite fast-paced environments. You might be working with a few other colleagues, but what that means is that you may be developing lots of different skills compared to working in industry. That's not for everybody though, because some people prefer to just have a set knowledge in terms of the specific job that they'll be doing, the specific role, whereas some people like to be more creative and maybe do like to try different options, have a go at different skills, work across lots of different areas. If that is you and you do enjoy those things, maybe it's worth having a look at working at a small company. It does mean that there's more learning on the job and you've got greater responsibility. So there may also be the opportunity for faster progression as well. So if progression is something that's really important to you and having those opportunities in the future for your career, and you are very driven and you do want to progress quite quickly, then maybe an SME might be for you. Obviously, there's also academia. So for you, you might want to think about whether you want to continue your education. So do you want to do a master's? Do you want to do a PhD? If you're coming towards the end of your PhD, do you want to move on to a postdoc? This has a lot more opportunity for creativity as well, because obviously it's all self-driven. Quite often you'll be driving the projects, there'll be a greater responsibility on yourself to work in academia. You'll look at publishing papers. You'll quite often have a very strong community as well within your specific research area. However, just one thing to be mindful of is working in academia is obviously that there's quite often cycles of grants funding, for example, or you may need to spend quite a lot of time looking at where your next funding is coming from. But you will have more freedom in academia to do the research that you want. So if you are somebody that is interested in driving your own research, you're very independent, then academia might be somewhere for you. And finally, there's education. So whether you might want to go into a teaching qualification, whether that's at high school or in higher education, whether you want to share your passion of the chemical sciences with the next generation, do you want to help train the next generation of chemists? So just some things to think about in terms of your next steps. So what can you do with a chemistry qualification? We've already spoken about this a little bit, but what I hope you can take away from this is that there are so many different places that you can work. So we've talked about the type of different areas that you could potentially work in. So for example, manufacturers, but also, you know, I'll be speaking to you later on about working for a publisher. Quite a lot of chemists we see go into consultancy, so advising others on chemistry specific knowledge. We also see, for example, quite a few people go into law to help with patent generation, or if there's for example, if it's going through the courts, there's a dispute over whether a particular compound, you know, is or isn't the same as another company. So that's also another way that you could potentially apply your knowledge in a very different way to working in the lab as well. There's also, obviously, as I've said previously when we were talking about the future workforce, it's not just about working in chemistry. It's more broadly that you might be in a profession that's supporting the chemical sciences, or maybe you go and work for an engineering company that needs that chemistry specific knowledge. So there's so many areas that you can work in that aren't just chemistry specific, that I tend to call them sort of like chemistry adjacent, because they're not pure chemistry, but they're very heavily interdisciplinary, and the company may have a more wide focus, but they really need your specialist skills to support them to achieve their goals. At the RSC, we do have a lot of people that work in science communication. So for example, the work on Chemistry World, for example, so work as science journalists, contributing to our website, and also we produce a monthly magazine called Chemistry World, and that's taking some of these really high level topics and making it really accessible for people to read. So maybe that's somewhere else that you want to think about going into if you like communication, if you like working with different people, but you know, maybe you don't want to go into teaching. Science communication and chemistry writing might be somewhat of interest to you. All of these areas that you would want to work in are heavily underpinned by your skills. And as a chemistry graduate and as a chemistry student, you're going to be developing so many different skills that you can apply within your job and within wherever you end up working in the future. So these are some of the top 10 skills that we're predicting are going to be needed for the future. So complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, teamwork, social skills, service orientation, negotiation, digital skills. But the really great news is that you get all of these skills through studying chemistry. If at the moment you're not sure about where these skills are being demonstrated in your degree, go and chat with your professors, because you will be developing these skills. So for example, teamwork, you might be doing an experiment in the lab where you're working with a couple of other students. That's a really nice example of teamwork. Quite often complex problem solving comes into things like examinations, also application of knowledge, where maybe you're given a problem that you've got to think about that's relevant for industry. Decision making as well, when you're in the lab and you're having to think about what's going to happen next, what's the next step of the reaction, what should you do next. All of these skills are in your chemistry degree, and they're becoming increasingly important for the future. And particularly digital skills, obviously, as AI is changing perhaps the way that we do chemistry, that is only going to become more important in the future as well. So what can you do while you're at university to make yourself the most employable and the most of interest to future employers? There's lots of different things that you can do while you're here to develop your personal skills, both in your chemistry degree, but also outside of it as well. You could be involved in organising events. These don't have to be with the chemistry department. They could be with societies at your university more broadly. You could also be involved in mentoring students, taking part in other clubs, for example, sports clubs. That's a really good way to develop lots of different skills that are transferable into your future employment. Again, such as teamwork, planning, all of those sort of things. You could participate in outreach activities as part of the community, particularly if you're interested in going into science communication or maybe education. Definitely something worth considering. And also just getting perhaps more involved with teaching and learning in your later years as well. So I mentioned at the start that the RSC is a publisher. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about why you might want to publish. I'm also going to talk to you about the different roles that we have available at the RSC as well. I'm going to caveat this with that I have not worked in publishing. So if you do have any specific questions about publishing, I might need to write them down and get back to you, but I will get back to you on them. So why would you want to publish? What is the driver for people to publish? So quite often it's wanting to contribute to the advancement of new knowledge, new research, and you want to share those discoveries that you've made with other people. You might want to establish yourself as a specialist knowledge, and you might want to establish yourself as a specific researcher in a particular area. You might also want to create a permanent record of the work that you've been doing for others to access. Quite often as well, it's for people that want to further their career, and quite often in academia, progression maybe is dependent on the type of publications that you've had, maybe the impact factor of your journal that you've published in. Quite often in the UK, it's reliant on funding. So if the funders will look at the number of publications that you've had in the past few years, your university might review the number of publications that you've had, and then they will base the amount of funding that you will get on that. And then finally, obviously, it's about promoting research as well. So the RSC has a lot of different journals. We are in the transition to open access. So what that means is that previously, journals might have had subscription fees that you might have had to pay to access them. We are now moving to a more open form of science. And what that means is that quite a few of our journals are now open to the public to access generally. So it's called open access. So there's a QR code for you to go and have a look at our journals if you're interested in those. But we have a very broad range of topics that the RSC covers, and we have a lot of people working on our journals to make sure that they're producing really high quality publications and really high quality science. When you're looking at a publisher, there's different ways that you could potentially publish. So you could, for example, choose to publish with a not-for-profit. So that's for people such as the Royal Society of Chemistry, for example, the ACS. However, you also have private publishers as well. So those are people like Wiley, Elsevier, there's also Springer as well. So they are for-profit publication houses. They do work in essentially exactly the same way that we do. It's just that our focus obviously is any money that's made from publication immediately goes back into our membership and working with our members and providing the funding that we would want to do for our members as well. How the way that publishing works, the timescales can be a bit different depending on where you submit your journal to. So what normally happens is that you submit a manuscript that you've probably spent a lot of time and effort writing, creating, putting all of your research into, and there's an initial assessment. There's two different ways that can go. You can either be have a rejection or a transfer. The reason that they might do that is if a publication comes in that maybe isn't quite right for that particular journal. So they may reject it and say, actually, it's just not suitable for this journal. This isn't a topic that we're interested in. Or sometimes what the RSC normally quite often does is they might transfer it to another journal. So they might say, your research might not be of the most interest to the readers of this journal, but we'd recommend that we transfer you to this journal as an alternative. In order to avoid that step, it's really important that before you publish, you spend a lot of time researching the journal that you're going to submit to make sure that it's really aligned with your research areas, so that you're not spending lots of time and money submitting to journals that actually were never going to be able to publish your article in the first place. So when you're getting to the point of publication, it's really important to consider that. And arguably, it might be more important to spend a bit more time making sure that you're going to the right journal than it is to make sure that it's submitted in time, so that you can make sure that it has got the most chance of success. If it goes through the initial assessment and they think it would be suitable for this journal, it will then go through the peer review process. So this is at least 2 people that will look over the article. They're normally specialists in your particular area, and you'll get evaluation as well. You'll get feedback. So quite often what happens in the peer review process is that you'll get specific feedback from the reviewers that you'll then have to respond to. They might make suggestions of changes to your paper. They might make recommendations of experiments that they'd like you to do before you go through to publication. But all of that can take a little bit of time. If it goes through, you've made those revisions, they've reviewed it again, and it goes through to evaluation, it will then either go to acceptance, or sometimes if it's been rejected, you can also appeal the decision as well. But obviously, in order to make sure that you're staying on the right-hand side of this diagram, making sure that it's going all the way through, as I've said, it is really important to make sure that you submit the paper when it's ready, you submit it to the right journal as well. So what might you expect from a quality publisher? So the RSC really prides itself on the publications that it has, and we're really proud of the fact that we're seen as a trusted voice in publishing within chemistry. So what you would be looking for is making sure that you've got that editor support when you're going through publication, and I'll explain in a bit more detail about what our publishing editors do at the RSC. All of our publishing editors have got chemistry backgrounds, so that is another option that you might want to consider to go into. There's also, you would want to make sure that they're still developing and that they're doing horizon scanning as well. A lot of the publication teams spend a lot of time looking at the new areas of chemistry that are coming out, so that we can make sure that the journals that we have are truly relevant of the chemistry that is currently being done, making sure that we're not sort of behind the times on a new area that might be of interest. So again, it's this idea that you're really making sure that you're producing publications that are of interest for the community, and that you're making sure that the science that's happening is getting the best representation it can. Connected to that, obviously, is innovation. So the RSC, again, we have a lot of people that work on looking at the offer that we have at the moment, whether it's fit for purpose, whether there's anything that we might want to do, to whether we want to make changes. So maybe looking at the way the submission process works, maybe looking at the way the review process works. Are there new technologies that we can introduce? You also want to make sure that any publisher that you choose has a good infrastructure. So there's staff training, for example, it's got good facilities. There's also, it's very clear in terms of the policies and procedures. So for example, that if you do want to appeal when you've published something, that it's really clear what that process would be. It's very clear to you as the author that's submitting, that you know what to do and where to go to for information. Ethics as well is obviously very important. This is obviously becoming increasingly important because of AI. So you need to make sure that any publisher that you're choosing with has really robust ways to perhaps detect plagiarism, perhaps detect false papers, so that you can be really sure that you can trust that publisher, that the information that they're providing is the best quality science, and you're not reading a fake paper or something that was never going to work anyway. And also making sure that a publisher has got adequate revenue. Again, this is so this idea that they can invest back into the work that they're doing, and they can make sure that they are innovating and that they are supporting you as authors as well. So having gone through a bit about the publication process, maybe you're thinking, oh, actually, this is somewhere that I'd be really interested in working. So at the RSC, we have a lot of what's called publishing editors. So publishing editors are quite often the first people that are working across particular journals. So it's quite common for a publishing editor to work across several different journals. They're quite often aligned to your specialist area from your study at university or perhaps from your PhD as well. What their role is that they start reviewing journal articles. They will decide, along with other members of the team, if they're a good fit. So if you really like reading about science, you like seeing things that are up and coming, maybe a publishing editor would be a really good role for you. They'll also work to identify who might be relevant and who might be the best person to peer review a particular journal as well. Again, that's making sure, and that's a really important role, making sure that the best peer reviewers are going to be reviewing the paper so that the author can be sure as well that it's going to be seen by specialists. They spend a lot of time reading reviewer reports, liaising with authors, helping them make them those changes. And this is an entry-level position as well. Once you've been working as a publishing editor for a few years, you might want to move up to an assistant editor. So they do very similar tasks to the publishing editor, but then a few more as well. So they might reach out to researchers. They might work on social media, promotional mailings, working on themed collections. And again, entry-level position, but a little bit higher up, maybe after you've had a couple of years as a publishing editor, or maybe you want to go into publishing straight after your PhD or postdoc. Once you've got a bit more experience, you could then apply for some higher level roles. So for example, we have deputy editors, editorial managers, and executive editors. So these start to become the people that are really looking at strategy, maybe looking at the areas that are coming out in chemistry and perhaps making the decisions about whether we want to offer a new journal, for example. Quite often as well, they're heavily involved in managing teams. They might be providing advice to colleagues, guidance perhaps on particular papers. There's also opportunities at this point if you do like traveling to attend conferences as well. And it's quite common for colleagues in publishing. They usually attend one conference a year in their specialist area, again, to make sure that they're staying up to date with the most relevant research and really make those connections, particularly if they're looking for peer reviewers in a particular area as well. So there's lots of different opportunities for progression within publishing. As you can see, you can start at an entry-level role and move through. And there's also lots of opportunities for if you are interested in perhaps travel, there's opportunities for that. And also if you like using your chemistry knowledge, you like seeing a lot of new research, or maybe you like reading about things that are coming up in chemistry, maybe publication might be a place that you'd be interested in working. Skills that you might need to work within publishing are things like your scientific knowledge. Obviously, that's really important because you are going to be working at the forefront of chemistry. Communication skills, teamwork, problem solving. What I hope you take from this, though, is if you think back to the slide that I showed you previously about the 10 skills that are required for the future, there's a lot of overlap between skills that are required for the future and skills that are required to work in publishing. And then also skills for just working in science generally, you know, they're largely the same. So the skills that you'd require for working within publication can also be seen as the skills that you just need for working in any chemical science role. So when you're looking at where you want to apply, maybe what you want to do in your future, really think about the skills that you have now, what you like doing, what you enjoy, maybe what you don't want to do to help guide yourself in the future. And it all goes back to this idea of using your time at university really wisely. There's all of these skills that employers are looking for when you're going to be applying for different jobs. So really make sure that you take advantage of all of the opportunities that are presented to you at university, whatever they might look like, to make sure that you have those skills and that you give yourself the best chance in the job market once you reach graduation. So how can the RSC help you in future? So one of the things that I do just want to take a moment to think about is this idea of when you're starting your career, it's really important to accept that everybody makes mistakes, and that's absolutely okay. Especially for me, I maybe went into a role that wasn't 100% suitable for me at the University of Warwick, but that wasn't a waste of time and that wasn't invaluable experience. because it gave me the experience that I needed to then get my next role. And it really developed skills like project management, for example, because I was working on open days. I was really working on my communication skills. So there's no such thing as a mistake personally. I think I like to see them all as learning opportunities. We can't learn if we don't make a mistake. That's not how the learning process works. You're always learning, and it's always really important to focus on solutions over problems as well. And challenges are opportunities for you to learn and develop. Everybody is going to face challenges in your career just because of the way that the job market is at the moment. So it's really important to make sure you're being kind to yourself, and mistakes happen. We all make mistakes. That's what makes us as human. But what's really important is that you learn from those mistakes. You learn about yourself. You maybe learn about what you want to do in the future. All jobs that you take are learning opportunities and tell you something a bit about yourself that you can use in your future career. Obviously, publishing is a really fast-paced environment, so that is something that maybe you would want to consider, and things can change very quickly. So again, when you're applying for different roles, for example, we talked about SMEs, small, medium enterprises. They have a very fast-paced environment, lots of change happening. So think about whether you are the type of person that likes change. When you're preparing for interviews, there's quite common a lot of different interview techniques that you can use. One that's quite commonly used in the UK is SHARE. So it's situation, hindrance, action, result, evaluation. I personally think that's too much, so I use this one because it's a bit shorter and it's a lot more to the point. So when you're in interviews, what you want to think about is that when you're being asked questions is making sure that you're structuring them in a really nice way. It can be quite difficult in interviews, everyone's always very nervous. So I'd always recommend that you go in with a plan of how you're going to respond to your answers. The way that I do that is I use the context or the circumstance that I'm in. So that's really explaining, if I get asked a question about teamwork, I'll start to explain, well, when I was working at the University of Warwick, I was working on the Open Days team. I was working in a big team. You would then move on to your actions. So you would say, for example, I was responsible for organising, I'm just going to pick something out there. I was responsible for organising the buses and the park and ride, for example, which was a budget of £100,000. So I oversaw that project. I took responsibility for that. And the end result you would then talk about would be, for example, it was delivered really successfully. We got really good feedback. So it's a way to structure your answers to make sure that you're thinking through your examples and you kind of don't go off on a tangent when you're in interviews, because that's very easy to do because we all panic when we're in interviews. You get asked a difficult question. But if you can practice and you have a set structure that you're going to follow through, it really helps you just calm a little bit. And it helps me particularly in interviews and with interview technique, that I can also make sure that I'm thinking about the questions the interviewer has asked me and making sure that I'm giving them all of the information that they want. So I'd recommend that you use that. Some general interview tips. When you're preparing, make sure you choose specific examples, and also make sure that you match your skills to the question. So if they ask you about communication, don't start talking about teamwork. Make sure that you are specifically matching the skills that you've got, the examples that you've got, to the particular area. Make sure you know the job description as well. Unfortunately, you will probably have to apply for a lot of jobs, but it is really important when you're in that interview that you are 100% dedicated to that role and that particular team, that particular company that you've applied for. So really make sure that you know the job description in and out, so that if they do ask you any particular questions or particular skills, you fully know what is expected of you within that role. Make sure you research the organisation as well. This is really important, I would argue, even before the point you get to interview. The reason for that is that you want to make sure that the company aligns with your ethos, aligns with your values. I spoke earlier about why I wanted to work for the RSC. I'd gone away and done a lot of research about the values of the RSC, the purpose, their mission, what they were trying to do in the chemical sciences. And that is why I then applied for a job with them. You don't want to end up working somewhere that maybe doesn't align with your values. So for example, if you do want to work in sustainability, maybe you don't go and work for a mining company, for example, because that's not really aligning with your ethos unless the role is particularly focused on making mining more sustainable. So make sure you research the organization really well before interview, but also before you're applying as well. It's always really good to have a practice interview with somebody just so you can get all of the nerves out. This could be with your colleagues, with students that you're working with, or you could perhaps ask your professors as well if they could spend 10, 15 minutes just asking you some common interview questions. You will always probably be asked technical questions related to chemistry, but quite often you will be asked soft skills questions. So can you give an example of a time when you worked in a team? Can you give me an example of a time where you've had a difficult conversation? So they don't need to be specialists. So you could even do it with friends and family as well. If you go onto the RSC website, there's lots of information on there about how to prepare for interviews. There's an interview simulator. So I'd recommend you go and have a look at that. Also really important as well is to prepare questions to ask them. So normally when you get to the end of an interview, they'll say, do you have any questions for us? It goes back to this idea that you've researched the organization and that you've researched the job description. So you could, for example, ask, what does a typical day look like in this particular role? This is really important because, for example, if you're somebody that likes creativity and then they tell you that every single day in that role looks the same, you might realize that actually maybe this job isn't for you. If you're really focused on progression, you might want to ask them about what the progression opportunities are at this company, or maybe what the opportunities are for professional development. As well as interviews finding out whether you were the right fit for the company, interviews are also an opportunity to work out if the company is the right fit for you. So I'd really recommend that you do have just a few questions prepared, ready. Maybe you have got some questions that you want to ask them from the job description or about the organization more generally, so that you can also make sure that you've got as much information that you need. So if they do offer you the role at the end of it, you can be sure that it is the right role and the right fit for you. So the opportunities that I've spoken about can all be supported by the RSC. So as I've said, I work with the careers team. I can't speak highly enough of the careers team. They're amazing at what they do and they produce so many resources for chemists working in the chemical sciences. The RSC has got a lot of chemistry specific information and chemistry specific support that you can access. So we've recently produced a piece of software called Pathfinder, which allows you to track your accomplishments and skills. The RSC can offer CV guidance, and there's also career planning support as well. I really like the Chem Careers library. So the careers team produce a lot of webinars on a huge variety of different topics. So for the students in the audience, if you're maybe still thinking about your future, maybe you're not quite sure about where you want to go into, what you want to do, there's a whole bank of webinars that you can go and access through our membership area, covering a lot of different things like skills that we've talked about, career opportunities. There's things about undergraduate support, maybe if you want to go for a research career in academia. But there's also a lot of interviews with industry as well. So interviewing people that are working in these particular roles, so you really can understand a bit more about the particular jobs that they do. So for example, there's ones on working in the pharmaceutical industry, working in water, working in agriculture. So if you're not 100% sure about what you want to do, I'd really recommend going and accessing this. Each webinar is about an hour long. They're all accessed throughout the members area, and there's a lot of information in there that you can access as well. The RSC also gives you the opportunity to network with others. And we also know a lot as well within chemistry that networking is really important for that future progression as well. So the RSC has a lot of opportunities for you to engage with other people, perhaps in your specific subject area, perhaps by location, but also through volunteering opportunities as well. And we have what's called a volunteer hub that you can log into, and you can see all of the volunteering opportunities that are coming up in that particular area. They can be online, they can be one-off, they can be longer commitments, but you can also network as well through your particular area. Across the world, we do have a lot of local sections where you can network with people who are also RSC members within chemistry. We don't currently have one in Mexico, but that doesn't mean that you can't set one up, and the RSC can provide funding and support to help you set up a local section as well. So if you are interested in connecting with other people who are part of the RSC in Mexico, there's that opportunity there for you too. So I'm going to end by just saying thank you very much. And if you have got any questions, I'm happy to take them. But also, if you'd like to contact me via email, please do. And there's also the membership team details there as well. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Now we will open the floor for questions. Is there any question?
Thank you, Val. Thank you, Claire. Very interesting. I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on the specific opportunities for our students that are here in Mexico and Latin America, because I know that RSC has a lot of efforts put into that. And also maybe if you could expand a little bit on the part of material science, because of course we have plenty of chemists, but we also have material scientists and physics or physicists. So maybe you could comment on that.
Yep. So I will caveat this with, I'm an organic chemist, so I'm desperately thinking back to all of the different opportunities that we have at the RSC. So we have something called subject communities, and we do have a material science subject community. So that is a membership group made up of people working in the material sciences, and they are focused on advancing the material science. It is a broader subject community. So the way that the RSC works in terms of its membership groups, we have 7, if I remember correctly, subject communities. These are very broad and overarching. So for example, we have organic, inorganic, analytical, material science. And then underneath the subject communities that give you this broad overview, this broad membership, we then have our interest groups. There's 74 interest groups, and that's when you really go down into the specialist chemistry interests and material science interests. And they cover a whole range of different areas within the chemical sciences, and they are really focused on their particular specialist area. If there's not a membership group in your particular specialist area, there is support and funding for you to set one up as well. But I am sure that there will be material science ones. I just don't know them because I'm not a material scientist. The membership groups and the interest groups, they also produce a lot of events, for example. So they're very much self-driven. So there's opportunities for volunteering in terms of getting involved with the different committees. And these interest groups are worldwide, and they're not just based in the UK, although we are obviously a UK organisation. You're more than welcome to join any interest group that's of interest. They do run in-person meetings, but they also run online meetings as well. And again, through involvement, through volunteering with the committees, there's an opportunity to shape the direction of that particular interest group. And obviously, they're really good opportunities for networking as well. But there was another question as well about...
That was for material science.
Yeah.
As for Latin America. I know that you don't have anyone around here.
No, yeah. So we have an office in Brazil. So we have an RSC outpost in Brazil, but we don't currently have an interest group in Mexico. A local section in Mexico. However, we can work with you to set one up if you would like to. So I have been talking to other people as I've been on my visit here, and I would very much like to push for a local section in Mexico. So yeah, happy to work with you to set something up, and that would give you opportunities for meeting other people within the RSC, networking specifically across Mexico as well.
Thank you. Is there another question?
Thank you, Claire, for your presentation. I have two questions. One is related to what you were mentioning about local groups.
Yep.
Do you actually have to have a local group to have access to sponsorship for events? For instance, at some point, could we envision RSC sponsoring meetings like what we had this week?
Yep.
So that's the first one. And the second one is related to publications. I think an interesting starting point for students to become familiar with the process of publishing or writing a paper is actually participating as reviewers. Is there are there any resources that RSC would provide for students to, to train a bit as reviewers? At what stage would they be able to become reviewers for RSC journals? And those are the two questions. Thank you.
So the first question about funding. So no, it's not required to have a Mexico local section for you to organise events and get sponsorship from the RSC. We have specific funding for local sections. It's like protected funding where you can get funding to run your specific events, for example. Quite often, though, a lot of the funding that the RSC provides is individual. So for people that are at an earlier point in their career, we offer the Researcher Development Grant. That's one of our most popular grants, and that's funding of up to £500. That could be for conference attendance, but it could also provide funding for setting up their own conference. There's an application process that you have to go through, and I'd be happy to share more information on that. We do also provide lots of different funding. I think there is a scientific meeting grant funding. This is not my specialist area, so I'll follow up with you afterwards, but there is a lot of funding that is provided for events if you want to set them up for yourself. I would caveat that with you would need to be a member of the RSC to access that. That's obviously one of the member benefits, is that you have the opportunity to access funding. I would say especially the Researcher Development Grant is of particular value for people that are at an early point in their career. So maybe if you're doing a PhD or a postdoc, or you're in postgraduate education, that is one of our most popular applications, because it gives people at an early point in their career, the opportunity to travel internationally or maybe set up their own conference. It can also be used as well for if there's a particular course. So maybe you want to do a course on leadership skills because that's something that you would particularly like to develop. So it's a very broad grant, and there's a lots of different things that it could potentially be used for. Yeah. I think there was another question which I've probably forgotten. Reviewers, yes. So the RSC does provide guidance on reviewing and provides training on becoming a reviewer as well. I will need to go and take that question away and speak to our publishing team, but I can, if you give me your email, I can go away and connect with you on that afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there another question? Okay, Professor.
Well, more than a question, is more like a comment towards the students. I'm personally really grateful to societies because I think they do great work, and I'm really fond of both you and the ACS because of all of the work that you do, and that allow us to publish in most times actually for free, and even when you have to pay for a really small fee as compared with other for-profit publishers.
Yeah.
So I think it's really a win-win situation where we can publish with the societies for many reasons, of course, for their reputation, but also because I think it comes back to us in some way, right? So just wanted to mention that, and just I guess invite our students to strongly consider publishing in societies and not to invest in maybe other ones that are just for profit publishers.
Just thank you very much for that. But I really would recommend student membership. So if I remember correctly, student membership at the moment is something like £20 a year. So it's not, for the UK, it's not a lot of money. but it does give you so much career support, and also it's chemistry specific career support. So quite often what we see, especially in UK universities, is that students will go to their career support at their university, but it's very general. They don't necessarily know the specifics of how chemistry industry works. They can just give general pointers. The RSC careers team and career support is different because we have trained professionals that only work with chemists. Their entire role and jobs are just to produce chemistry specific career support, chemistry specific careers guidance. So if you're at an early point in your career, I really would recommend engaging with the RSC's careers team. And again, they work globally with lots of different people. So yeah, really recommend engaging with them.
I have three small
Yeah.
questions. The first is, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't want to follow an academic path, but still wants to stay close with science?
There's lots of different opportunities to move away from academia. I would say that the majority of people that I graduated with actually aren't working in academia anymore, but a lot of them are still working in chemistry and working in science. So it's not a failure if you choose to move away from academia. I've also got a friend who worked in academia for 10 years and now works for a publication house because they just couldn't get it to work. What is important is to think about what were you wanting to get maybe if you did want to work in academia? Was it that sense of freedom? So maybe you want to look at an SMA. Equally, if you don't want to work in academia, what didn't you like about it? On making sure that you align whatever role you're looking for, away from those areas. So maybe it was the inconsistency of lack of funding. So maybe you do want to look at working in industry, for a big organization where the roles are very secure, the funding's very secure because you're working for a big global organization. So when you're planning your career path, definitely worth thinking about what you want, what you like, maybe what you don't like, and maybe those push and pull factors that might pull you away from academia into a different role.
Okay. The second one is, what are some common mistakes that students make when they submit their first papers, and what are your advices for them?
I might have to come back to you on that one because I've not worked in publishing. So I will go and ask one of my publishing colleagues and I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. And the last one is here with the student chapter of the SM Mater is the Mexican Society of Materials. We organized an annual congress for students.
Yeah.
So my question is, RSC, the Royal Society of Chemistry, exists the opportunity to have your sponsorship?
Yes, so we do sponsor events. I will go away and have a look and get in contact because it's largely done through publishing. So it might be that you would want to speak to colleagues at a specific journal that would potentially provide sponsorship and support. If it is for a specific conference that's got a topic specific, it is largely done through publishing, but I can put you in contact with the relevant people within the RSC for that. Yeah.
Please, and thank you. Okay. Professor Argel, then Professor
Claire, thank you so much for your wonderful talk. More than a question, I just would like to rescue from your talk. It really got me when you say there's nothing wrong with making certain mistakes or going to certain paths and then just rebuild yourself. And I think there is a lot of pressure anywhere. Once the students are starting a master's degree, a PhD or whatever, and all of a sudden things, for whatever reason, I wouldn't even put it as they don't work. It's just things are different, things change. We change, don't we? The fact that you come here and you tell us, and thank you for that part of your beautiful story and your personal path, I think is super important. And what I want to rescue again and highlight is that there is not just one way. There is not just one way to do chemistry, to love chemistry, or whatever in terms of science. So for that reason, I just really want to thank you. The fact that you share something very personal, which is super important for our students, Claire. Seriously, thank you very much.
So I do a lot of work as a mentor. So I also spend my free time mentoring people. And the reason for that is because I think it is really important, and hopefully you can take some of my guidance from the talk today. I personally took quite a long time to work some of these things out, to identify maybe what I wanted to do, find somewhere that really aligned with my interests. And I would really hope that some of the things that we've spoken about today could maybe help you get through that path a little bit quicker, because what we all want you to do is to end up in a role that you really enjoy, that you find really fulfilling, you know, where you wake up in the morning and you want to go to work every day. So yeah, please really do think about your future. And I do appreciate when you're job hunting, it can be just, I will apply for anything because at this point I just need to get paid. There's also nothing wrong with that as well. But it's also just being conscious that, you know, that is what's happening. And maybe you do just take a temporary position for 6 months where it's just because you need to get the bills paid, but still make sure that you're thinking about what skills you're getting from that as well.
Thank you, Claire, for the talk. I'm sorry because maybe I miss it, but I would like to know if there is like a big meeting of the Royal Society of Chemistry, like the American Society. Yes, chemical. There is a big meeting, but I'm not sure if there is one meeting.
No, so we tend to do more subject-specific meetings. So those are either organised centrally by the RSC, so by the events team, or they're organised by our members. So we do run a lot of events, and they're all on our website, but there's no big conference like the ACS, for example. And sometimes it may be that we go to different conferences. So for example, I've got a colleague that's going to IUPAC later this year. We go to a lot of industry conferences, but we don't necessarily have a convention. I think that's maybe because of the way that the RSC is very member driven, and it wants to make sure that it's providing the right support that it needs for its members. And quite often members tell us that they do want to network with people with their specific chemistry area. So that's why it's very much focused on the chemistry, making sure that you can network with specialists, but there's no big conference.
So every year, some different subjects and things like that. So we should be looking at this.
Yeah. And they are global as well. They're not just in the UK. But yeah, it's very chemistry specific.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question here? If not, we can conclude this wonderful talk. Thank you, Claire. And we invite you to the cookies and coffee space. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Yep.